Hi, welcome to this webinar. Many of you know, and perhaps many of you have even seen, the romantic comedy When Harry Met Sally. Now, if When Service Desk Met IT Security was a movie, what would that be? I'm afraid it would be a tragedy or perhaps even a horror story. And this is what this webinar is about. If we go a level up, then we know that top management today has a clear interest in IT security. The reason is, as shown by a report from IBM by Ponemans, has shown that the average cost of a data breach, in the USA in 2018 is $7.9 million. Yes, $7.9 million as average. And of course, top management wants to prevent this. So let's go down here and look, as in the movie, on IT service management and IT service desk. When I talk to service desk management today, the focus is to a very high degree on how do we go from ITIL v3 to ITIL v4, how do we implement new ITSM tools, what about CMDBs, treating users as customers, service, productivity. When we'll talk to IT security management, they have a high attention to preventing hackers to attack their infrastructure, to get into their systems. Gartner says that about 80% of all investments in IT security is used to prevent attacks through the infrastructure. But the reality is that they meet. In the real world, IT service management and IT security, they meet. And a clear example is that IT security is responsible for password policies, password security, password awareness training, etc. But when a user has forgotten the password and needs a new password, they will call the service desk, where the service desk is responsible for the process. And imagine a situation where a criminal calls the service desk and asks for a password. If he gets one, you have a data breach. And remember, the average cost of a data breach is $7.9 million. Let's look at a real example. A real example is how Toyota lost $37 million from a business email scheme. The criminals got into Toyota's system and were able to impersonate real users, in this case executives, where they took over executives' email and sent instructions to employees in the finance department to transfer in smaller bits $37 million to unknown accounts, of course owned by the criminals. You can get a link to the article from CPO magazine from our LinkedIn page. Now, an important thing to remember is that whenever a criminal gets inside our system, then they are the user they impersonate. If we receive a mail from a colleague, then it is from the colleague. Even more, if a criminal gets inside, they can copy data or they can place malware to be used later for blackmailing. The article doesn't say exactly how the criminals got in, but one good way could be the suggestion from Kevin Mitnick. Kevin Mitnick is now a well-known white hat hacker. He used in the old days to be a black hat hacker, but then FBI and him made a deal that he would be a white hat hacker. In one of his books, The Art of Deception, as he says, why would a wise criminal spend hours or even months to penetrate a system technically, if all he needs to do is make a phone call to get access to the system? So this might have been what happened. If that's too difficult, then instead of asking for a favor from the service desk, you can bribe them. Criminals paid more than $1 million to service desk assistants at AT&T to get help and assistance as needed for a criminal act. No doubt the criminals made a lot more money than what they used for bribing. But this shows that it's not even enough to protect yourself against attacks from the outside. You also need to control and monitor what key personnel internally do, in particular those with privileged access. Ask yourself now, take a little time, how will your service desk do, what will they do when someone asks for a password? Will it be possible for a criminal to get a password for a legitimate user from your service desk? If you're in doubt, you might ask an ethical hacker to make a test. And I'll tell you that there is a high risk that your service desk will prioritize user service and speed. And if they do, security will suffer. If we take a look at the most authoritative report on data breaches from Verizon 2018, they have found that in 33% of data breaches, social engineering is involved. Social engineering is exactly this: impersonating other people to trick, for example, the service desk. In the same chart you see that in 15% of the data breaches, internal actors are involved, or authorized actors. Is that what we have in the service desk? Oh yes. In the service desk we have privileged passwords, so they are authorized. Another study made by not HDI but by Service Desk Institute, they asked service desk management, do you have a management decided process for how to verify users' identity when they call in? Quite shocking. In 35% of organizations, there was no management decided process, which means that each service desk agent has to make his own process of what he thinks is needed. But still positive, however, that 65% had a process. But when we ask the 65%, how do you verify that it is the right person? In more than 50% of the situations, the user or the person was asked about corporate data. That could be, what's the date of you were hired, what's the name of your manager, what's where you're located. There might be other information like this. Good questions should be part of it. But how difficult will it be for a determined hacker to get this information if it was needed? Well, this is not that secret, the information, so probably the criminal could get to this information. So we question how secure even the processes, even in those organizations who claim to have a process for the service desk assistants to follow. So in conclusion, most service desks have processes that can be bypassed by dedicated criminals. Many of you probably use SMS as tokens for personal verification. Now you should know that the US National Institute of Standards and Technology a couple of years back said don't use SMS at all, it is too unsecure. Now they have softened their position a bit and says, okay, you might use it for less important applications, but realize that you cannot know if someone else is picking up on any SMS being sent. So even that is not a secure way for your service desk to rely on alone. Now, if you feel a bit uncomfortable now, saying, wow, how is my position? Then you're not alone. Service Desk Institute asked the service desk managers, are you afraid of someone external picking up a password from your service desk? Of those who actually gave an answer, 83% said, yes, we are afraid that a password can be stolen from our service desk. And some of them even said, and we think we have done everything possible, and still they are concerned. So what should we do? What is the right answer to making this process that is clearly open to make data breaches from? Well, if you ask ITIL, it's hard to find. Not hard. ITIL does not say anything about this process. It just says, make it secure. And we've been looking for answers. And the European Public Information Security Organization from Denmark actually has a proposal and put up as a national secure standard. They propose or require that you use the manager approval model, which basically says that when someone calls the service desk and asks for a new, in this case, password, then the service desk must ask the manager to get approval that he will accept that his employee gets a new password. This is a great way to be secure, as it takes two criminals to do the trick, but it is a pretty expensive process compared to the process probably most of you have. If you want to make a secure process for user verification, consider who you're up against. When it really counts, you're up against a professional hacker. He's focused, he has time, he's prepared to invest in this because he expects to make plus $100,000 or more. He doesn't target your system. He targets a few individual, special persons where by impersonating them, he can make a difference. So he's professional. Are your service desk people, your service desk processes, up to the task against a dedicated professional? Now, I really like this picture here of Troy, where Troy, over decades, have built up an impregnable city that nobody could get in. It's the same with your people in infrastructure and IT security. They're building up an impregnable infrastructure. You cannot get into it. But someone have to get into it. And here we have the service desks as the guardians of the door. You have the keys to the castle. You decide who get in and who can't get in. Now, as in Troy, if you accept a false person, a criminal to get in, the damages is huge. Remember, on average, data breach cost is $7.9 million in US. So what should you do? What can you do? My suggestion, our suggestion to you is help users protect their data, because remember, they are responsible if their account is doing something criminal. They have to defend themselves, even if someone else has done it. Protect the people in your service desk, because if they give away a password, well, they're responsible, but they might not have the right tools to do it. So what I propose you to do later today, perhaps tomorrow, or soon anyway, is to make a clear written instruction, if you don't have it already, that says exactly what steps should all people in your service desk go through whenever they are asked to verify a user's identity. You might even, for special user groups, include manager approval. It takes time, much more time than today, but there are costs associated with security. That's how it is. Make sure that everybody in your service desk is trained in this, instructed in this, and keep on training and enforcing this behavior. This will take longer than it does today, but as we've talked about before, if you lack on security, the cost explodes, where the cost of a few minutes extra on a password reset is a cheap way. And then, of course, monitor and analyze the data you have for when the people with privileged passwords make password resets to others, so you can see if there is any pattern you don't like or should react upon. This you can do today without any investments in anything but your own time. However, this process depends a lot upon trust that it will be done correctly, that everybody will follow it. There's no doubt that the real and the best solution on the long run is to have an IT workflow that forces your service desk assistant to follow this exact workflow. Because for a manual process, we have to accept that some real users even will try to force upon your team in the service desk, give me a password now, I am in a hurry, I can't wait and answer all your funny questions, give me a password now, give me a password now. They will be put into stress from the pressure of end users. If they have a workflow that forces them to follow it, you will have the right solution for the future. Let's take a look at that. If you decide that you want to implement an IT workflow for the employee identity verification process that you use in password resets, for example, then there are 6 important principles that your solution must build on to make it secure and acceptable for the organization. The first principle is that, of course, we should have a management decided process. And I would say in particular, a process decided and approved at least from IT security, so that they accept that the tests put into this process are good and relevant tests. Now, in large organizations, we have employees with access to different levels of sensitivity. And therefore, we must have different processes. We must have some processes with a very light test of the user, so that we fast can give him a new password and get on, and there's low risk. And we have others where it's a disaster, might even be the death of the company, if criminals get access to their account, and there we need a very secure process. So there must be different processes for different user groups. As we have discussed through here, that the way we can authenticate users, it's very difficult to find a single method that is 100% secure. There's always a risk that some hackers have found a way to get through this particular one. So it's important that the verification process includes a number of different tests, so that the result is the multiple of all these different tests, and in this way make it secure by simply having the volume. To take away the possibility for users or criminal to stress your service desk assistants, then take away their privileged passwords. Take away the possibility that they can circumvent your secure IT workflow. by using the standard Microsoft tools. They can't if they don't have privileged passwords. Then they have to follow your workflow. And what is being said by security experts, for example from Gartner, is that if you want to have a very secure process, you must also have what is called dynamic and contextual data that changes dynamically, as it says, so that you can ask the user about data that no hacker has any chance of getting hold of. Like, what is the PC you're sitting at right now? Is that your right PC? When did you log off yesterday? Why aren't you on your normal location? Stuff like that. That must be included in the solution. And of course, a lot of monitoring tools so that you can see if some patterns are evolving. If you have these 6 principles in place for your solution, then you're in a good place. So now I'd like to go back to when ITSM met IT Security and say, I hope you have seen that there is a room where they meet, where they actually meet. But if you close your eyes for it, it will be a horror story. But if you face it, you can do something about it. You can do something fast in your manual work, and you can do the right thing on the long term by implementing an IT workflow that will make employee identity verification secure. It is possible. If you decide to make a secure verification of users, it will take longer time in your service desk per call, per password call, than you have today. This is a natural fact. This is the cost of security. The question is, can you afford it? Do you have the resources in your service desk to handle that password calls? They might be up to 20 or more than 20% of your total amount of calls. And if they double in time because they need to be secure, you might have a resource problem. So a good, compliant and complete process will be to introduce self-service for end users, where end users themselves can, in a secure way, reset a forgotten password or a locked password. For it to be really valuable, you must achieve a very high adoption rate or success rate. We would say that you should reach at least 90% of the password calls should be handled by users themselves, which means that you have only 10% left in your service desk. Then you have room to make that process very secure. But again, as we talked about a little bit earlier, it should of course adapt to the seriousness of the situation. Note in the illustration here that the only error to your password store, in this case Active Directory, actually come from the self-service part of the solution. As we propose that when the service desk has authorized that a person is okay, he is who he claims to be, then instead of giving him a password, they should push him up to self-service, and then he can go through a self-service process and get the password himself. And in this way, we are absolutely sure that no one in the service desk needs the privileged passwords for the Active Directory. So we think this is the best way. Push users back to self-service, then they know how to do it next time they forget a password. Now, we started to talk about the IT service desk, management, IT security, but I have mentioned identity again and again. So it will only be natural, as we've done here, to include identity, the identity architecture, as part of the drawing. But even when we do that, it's clear for us when we analyze what the different architectures' contribution to employee identity verification is, then there's no ownership. So that's why we here at FastPassCorp has made concepts or an architecture for employee identity verification. It's an architecture concept that covers what are the secrets we need to share with a person that can help us authenticate that he is who he claims to be. What kind of credentials are available to him? What are the credentials will he have when he's going to log into the system normally? And credentials we can use for the manual verification. And all the many different processes we need around this. Processes where the user needs assistance from others. They should all be seen in one context and should be an architecture available for different subsystems so that the user only needs to have his secrets in one location. So this is a long-term architecture that we will propose to you and to the market. Then just as a final word, what is FastPassCorp and what can we offer in this situation for the service desk? Now this is very much as the illustration you saw before, that we offer a solution for self-service where we have seen again and again that our customers reach an adoption rate of more than 90%. This actually means that the total cost of handling problems with passwords are lower than they probably are at your present situation, even when you use our solution for the manual process that we call FastPass Facilitated Password Reset to make the secure IT workflow, and it will take longer than your present manual process. But because of the productivity gains you have in the self-service, you will even find that you have a complete compliant process that costs you less than it will do in a manual process. It's been a pleasure presenting this to you. I hope I have inspired you to go back and take a look to see, do you, with your service desk, give the contribution to IT security that you need to do, that you are not giving away the key to the castle. I hope I inspired you. I'm sure many of you have complete control of the key to the castle, but still there might be bits and pieces here and there that might help you in your day-to-day when you get back. Now, we're open for questions. Let us see if you have any comments or questions to the presentations we just did. Thank you.